Hello and welcome to Tim's BMW repairs and information. Well, I've done a few buyer's guides on the BMW E31, this being an 840ci. In the past, all available on YouTube, but this is different. This is from the perspective of a buyer who's come to have a look at one on a garage forecourt or in a private sale. What are the sorts of things we've got to look at? For a start, the BMW E31 isn't just a normal car. It was quite an expensive car to start with, and we've got to make sure that the car was very well maintained during its life. Now we could have a look at the service history, but it's pretty irrelevant on an E31. Some of these cars only do, well, less than 1,000 miles a year. And sure, the oil was changed every 5,000 miles, but after 5 years, that oil's had it and damage has occurred to the engine. So there's certain key features, especially in the engine bay, we can check to make sure we're not going to have engine problems immediately. But there's one thing that the E31 really doesn't lend itself to, and that's sort of cheap motoring. I'm afraid a car of this age is going to go wrong, and you've either got to have quite a bit of money to go to a trusted independent and have it repaired, or you're going to have to repair it yourself. And if you can't repair it yourself, then it becomes rather expensive. And these cars do have a tendency to suddenly go wrong. You've got to have the commitment to own one, I'm afraid. They're really not suited to being a car which is meant to be reliable, get you back and forwards to work on a daily basis without going wrong. So I'm afraid that's not going to happen. They do go wrong, and they do need a bit of fettling to keep them going. And being an old car, and let's face it, I mean, this is a 99 model, actually built in 98 December. It's about one of the youngest ones, and let's face it, it's 21, 22 years old now. And so things like rubber seals and stuff like that, and they're starting to go hard and fail. And for instance, the seals around the doors are hugely expensive from BMW, nigh on impossible to fit. And some of them are no longer available. So you've got to have a car that's been looked after, otherwise you're going to have problems like that, which are going to cost you an arm and a leg, or be impossible to repair. So that's the aim of this video, is we're going to go through the car, and we're going to look at all aspects of it, and I'll point out the things that are going to cost you a lot of money to fix, and the things which you've got to make absolutely sure they're okay before you buy the car, because you really don't want to be spending a huge amount of money on it to start with. And also we'll take the car out for a test drive and make sure everything's okay, and we'll take it from there. Right, let's get on with it. Right, on most cars I'd start in the engine bay and have a good look around it, and we will do in a minute, but on an E31, start in the cabin. That's the most important thing. The leather and the upholstery, most of it is no longer available, so we've got to make absolutely sure it's in really good condition. So let's go and have a look. First thing is the door switch. Yes, the door handle. Yep, it's imperative that the door handle works properly on the driver's side, because they are no longer available. And so if you wanted that to be repaired at a garage, that's not going to happen. There are ways of repairing the door handles on the driver's side, and there's kits provided by a few like-minded E31 enthusiasts, and we can repair the door handles, but it's very important that it works in the first place. It should go up nicely, open the door. Now if there's any problem with opening the door, then we know we're going to have a problem with the door handle, and unless you want to spend money on it, then avoid it. Oh, it's nice to be in an E31, it really is. So have a good look around the cabin, make sure that everything looks neat and tidy, there's no broken bits. It's bits of trim and things like that, but very difficult to repair. And for instance, this surround which goes around here, that is available from BMW, but unfortunately the finish is slightly different, so you end up with things not matching if you have to replace this. So have a good look at that to check that it's all in one piece. I'm afraid the sun's very bright today, so it's rather contrasty. But yeah, have a good look at all the plastic work. Now it's covered with a soft touch material, which sounds like a great idea, and it does feel soft to the touch. It doesn't feel like plastic, but unfortunately that soft touch material does fall off, and it'll eventually wear off, and then you've got a situation where you either replace the bits of plastic with ones from BMW, or a breaker if you're lucky enough to find one, or you're going to have a go at fixing it yourself. So this is a good example here. We're just starting to wear the soft touch material out around here, but this is still in great condition. So even though it's an old car, second-hand car, which we really wouldn't bother about the condition of the interior too much, on a BMW E31 we've got to, because it's so difficult to replace anything. So have a good look around and have a look at the seats, make sure the bolsters aren't worn out and torn, because it's going to cost you a lot of money to fix it. So yeah, this is why we're in the cabin to start with, rather than looking at the engine bay, because yeah, it's in here that it gets rather expensive to replace. Let's have a look at the headliner. Now I'm very glad to say mine is all in good shape, but it won't be like that forever. And as I say, to have an upholsterer sort out this headliner, and it's very delicate as well, so don't go poking it, because it'll leave a mark and it won't come off again, and it'll eventually droop down at that place. Yeah, so have an upholsterer fix it. As I said, we got to get the A and C car pillars out. There's our C pillar there, and the clips break on them, and you can't get this as a replacement part. So you'll be into sort of doing DIY methods to get it back in again. And a lot of members have done that. A lot of owners have done that, and that's fine. But just to be aware that problems with a headliner aren't as trivial as you thought. It's going to take a bit of time and a bit of money to sort it out. So that's another good thing to look at. The centre vents there, you would have thought be absolutely trivial, but no. If they break, they have to be replaced from the inside. The screws are on the other side, and that means you've got to get the dash out to repair it. So yeah, make sure that the grille is in there and isn't going to flop out and all the rest of it. And yeah, that's another expensive thing to try and fix. Okay, so yeah, it really is a case of looking around the interior, making sure you're perfectly happy with it. You don't really want to start by replacing all the upholstery as soon as you buy a car. Yep, so make sure the leather's in great condition, hasn't faded and worn, and this is in good condition. And in the next video, we'll go through sort of routines of keeping everything in great condition, and it's not arduous really, and it's great as a hobby, maintaining an E31 in good condition. Right, in cars which have been in sunny climates, of course you can get the dash cracking, but in England that's not a problem here. We suffer more from damp, and so we're going to have a look at where the damp gets in, and we're going to check that no damp has got into this car. Instruments, lovely and bright and clear, important to have that. We'll check things in a minute. Now there is a checklist on one of the forums, I think it's on EHTRAS, I can't remember for sure, that gives you all the things to check on a E31, but really it's pretty much irrelevant, because you're never ever going to find a car which has got everything perfect. Not a car of this age, that would be absolutely impossible. So what we're more interested in is the things that are going to cost you a bit of money, or it's going to be very awkward to fix. Okay, so we've had a quick look around the interior. Obviously we haven't had a look at the driver's seat. This car has got excuse me, it's got the CSI interior, which was an option, a free option in the UK in 1998 and 1999. So we got, if you wanted the interior to be the CSI, yeah, you can have that for nothing. So we got complete CSI interior and the exterior for CSI splitters, rear splitter and the suspension and so on. So in the UK, when looking for an E31, if you're looking at a late one, would expect it to have all the special stuff in it, looking like a CSI inside and out. In the rest of the world, of course, in the States, it was discontinued in '97. So you never got the option to get everything free. But in the UK, yep, look out for the individual models like this one is. So it's got a exterior colour, which is more a metallic, and it's got an individual interior, which is champagne nappa. Another thing well worth checking are the door seals. Now, it might seem a trivial thing, but for instance, this door seal here is £200 from BMW, but it's easy to look after them using gummy fledge, which softens up seals and keeps them supple. But if you have a look at a car and this is all broken and really brittle, you can be sure that the car hasn't been looked after properly. It's easy enough to use gummy fledge on it. Us E31 and E32 owners do it quite often to keep these in good condition. But once they break, once they become brittle, then it's a bear of a job to replace them. You can't get second-hand ones for love nor money because they tear when they come off. So brand new ones it is, £200 per side. Yeah, seems ridiculous, but it's a great indication whether a car's been well looked after. So have a look at this seal and just check that it's nice and soft and supple. And then also have a look at the seals which go up here and around the door opening. Make sure they're in good condition as well. It's a good indication whether the car's been looked after. This E31 is a sports model, and how do you define a sports model? Well, it has the lower bumper device or spoiler from the CSI, and it's got this splitter here. Well, it should do. I've seen so many of them with the large cavity, but without the splitter, and that's because it's so low and it does get knocked off. So if you find one which has got the big cavity but no splitter, that's what's happened. Price about £1,000 painted to get that replaced, so it's not trivial. So yeah, knock £1,000 off if it hasn't got the splitter at the front, because it's going to cost you money to put it back on again. And it also has the same sort of device at the back. So there we go, it's got this lower splitter here, and they can fall off, and I've seen E31 Sports for sale without that on there at all. It's just missing, and I've dropped mine as well, lost that once, and fortunately found it again the next day in the middle of a roundabout and just stuck it back on again. And from then on, of course, you just screw it all in and stop it coming off again. And the front splitter, that's reinforced with a metal plate now. So there you go, that's two things that the Sports has. Next thing has sports seats, and these have larger bolsters. The standard seats have quite large bolsters, but these are much bigger. And the most obvious thing, it has the thigh support, which is adjustable, electrically adjustable. Not part of the memory system, by the way. There you go, that's quite interesting. And then of course it has different suspension, and the suspension on this car is called Nürburgring suspension, and it's very difficult to tell what it is without actually getting the wheel off and actually having a look at the dampers, which have yellow dot on them for the Nürburgring ones. But a car of this age, 22 years old, is quite likely had the suspension changed at some point, and you're never quite sure whether they put the right stuff back in again. Apart from when you drive it, and if it handles like this one does, then you can be pretty sure it's got the sport suspension on it. A few more things to check. One important one, of course, is the E31's got pop-up lights. We've got to make sure they pop up. So you need the ignition key for that. Turn it into the run position. Headlights up. And make sure they go back down again. And while you're at it, you can check all the lights are working. So put the front fogs on and put the main beams on. And there we go. Of course, with cars in other areas, the FTPs, which are the lights in the light strip, they don't come on with the high beams. They only come on when you press pull the stalk towards you. But on UK cars and European cars, they come on with the main beams. So we'd expect to see all the lights on at the front. I think I better check. Yes, because the FTPs have such a narrow beam on them, they're difficult to see from anywhere apart from where you'd expect them to go, which is onto the road. So there's the FTPs working. Main beams, one each side. They're LEDs on this car, because I like the extra brightness. So yeah, all lights are working. Yeah, obviously make sure they tuck themselves away again. Repair of the pop-up lights isn't hard, but the problem is, of course, is that the looms are very fragile. So you may have to repair or replace the looms. They're extortionately expensive from BMW, same as the FTP ones. The FTP lighting looms are £400 a pair. That's a lot of money. The FTPs themselves, the glass and the housings and so on, same price. So when you're looking at repairing things on the FTPs, it does get rather expensive when you think there's £400 aside. Getting close to £1,000 to repair FTPs is a lot of money. So make sure the glass isn't cracked in them and the indicators are nice and clear and so on. Euro ones have smoke lenses, so they look slightly different. Yeah, so if you've got a cracked one, you can say, well, that's going to be 200 quid, so about $300 or something to fix that problem. So yeah, tot it up, you know, if the garage owner says, well, it's just a tiny crack, yeah, but it's going to cost 200, 300 quid to fix it. Yeah, you might find that when you get the FTP out, the loom falls apart, so it's another 200 quid for that. Yeah, so it was £400 or £500 for an FTP complete, £1,000 for both of them. So yeah, tot it all up. Yeah, it's very important to realise that there's some things on an E31 that are very difficult and expensive to repair, and FTPs is one of them, the lighting loom's another one. Okay, so we've checked quite a few things. The most important one, I think, in my opinion, is the interior condition. It's important that all the leather's in great condition because it costs so much to fix it. Oh, there's one thing we need to check, of course, is the operation of the electric seats themselves. So that's well worth checking. I'll bring you in. Right, the seats are adjustable in so many directions on these. It's got 3 memory selections on it. So I can tilt the whole thing backwards and forwards. You can tilt the seat base backwards and forwards. Obviously the whole seat can go forwards and backwards. And on sports seats, because this is a sports models, we get to the bolster here, and that should be able to be adjusted forwards and backwards. Let's put the stuff on again, so yeah, we can check that all works. It's not that expensive to fix, but it absolutely cripples you, because what you can have is problems with the cables that run from the motors, and replacing those cables unfortunately usually means removing the seat from the car, and I'll tell you, they weigh a ton and they're bolted down pretty securely because they of course are part of the safety structure of the car. The seat belt actually goes into the seat and the whole seat can move forwards and back, and so getting a seat out of the car isn't trivial. They do weigh a ton and bolted down. Also check that the seat can go forwards and backwards. These catches here can break, and then you can't get the seat to lock and you can't get it to go forward either. So very important, check both of the seats, and then check the operation. Well, check the operation of the bolster, that's pretty straightforward. Up and down, and make sure that the seat goes up straight, because when you have cable failure, one side will go up and it will twist the seat, which is the infamous seat twist problem. And the same when going forwards and backwards and moving bits up and down. So the whole seat should go up and down like that, and the same at the back like that, and not one side go up and twist you over. That's not good. Not expensive, and there again the E31 community will help you out to get the special cables which go between the motors and the drive parts to sort those problems out. But as I say, they're very difficult problems to sort out, and you can get to a couple of them from the front of the seat, but it's very difficult to do it, and I really don't fancy being down there trying to get the cables in and out. Much easier with the seat out. So yeah, make sure your seats go forwards and backwards. Yeah, probably before your test drive actually, because you don't want to get it in it and then find the seat only tilts upwards rather than get you to the right height. There have been complaints about the headroom in these cars, but being 5'11" is not a problem for me. Excuse me. But I have heard of people whose heads hit the headlining, and that's not good for the driver or the headlining, to be honest. So yeah, be aware that if you're exceptionally tall, then you might not fit in and it's not the car for you. So yeah, so that's it. Seat motors checked in all directions, backwards and forwards, that bit up and down, that bit up and down, whole thing forwards and backwards. Not expensive to repair, but damn awkward. Okay, so that's the seats checked, and as we say, we make sure they go forwards and backwards. If you want to know more information about sort of the storage in these cars, how the lights work, how the air conditioning works, what the mid does, as I say, I'll put the links up there to the buying guide. This video is really about how to buy a good one rather than telling you how everything works. That's better served in the other videos. Right, well, here's something well worth looking at, which is window delamination. I'm afraid that does often happen on the E31, and apart from the fact that it looks unsightly, it also has disconnected the defrosting wires as well, so you slowly run out of wires which do anything. So anywhere where there's slight discoloration, all the way down there, yep, those lines don't work anymore. As soon as it delaminates, the wires burn out. Now you might think, well, I don't often go out where I need the defrosters. Well, not only are they defrosters, they're also the FM aerial as well. So if you lose all of them, you lose your aerial. And to top all of that as well, it's used as the alarm system to check if a rear window's been broken. And so what it does is it checks continuity in the wires when the car's switched off and locked. And if it loses continuity in the defrosting element, then the alarm goes off. And of course that's going to happen at some point. Once all of this is delaminated all the way up, then the alarm's going to start coming off. But it's good in one way, which means it's the original glass. And we've still got the original BMW mark here. There we go. And I've got the same on the front windscreen. And that means you're probably not going to get rust bubbles starting to appear here. Because unfortunately when the fitters change the glass, they sort of wrench the old one out, and they use all sorts of tools which damages the paintwork underneath the window itself. And if they don't repair that damage, and most of them don't, they put the new glass in, and a year down the line, 2 years down the line, you start getting bubblers of rust appearing in all of these areas, and it's really, really difficult to get rid of. Obviously the glass has got to come out again. So yeah, same with the front glass, that's original BMW glass, and so I don't have any rust bubbles appearing along here. And so yeah, it's a bit of a toss-up really between, well, it's got original glass, which is great. I mean, the visibility is affected to somewhat, it's not absolutely perfectly translucent anymore, but at least we're not getting any rust bubbles appearing everywhere. And the same with the rear one. It's a bit of a pain with the defrosting wires disappearing. I think I've got about 5 or 6 of them left. That's about it. The rest of them have gone white and are starting to disappear. But at least it's original glass, and that means no rust bubbles appearing in very difficult places to fit. So my opinion is I'll have to put up with that and not having that window changed, because no matter how hard they try, they always end up scraping off the undercoat, the base coat, and yeah, and then of course we'll get rust bubbles appearing. I'd much rather have a few defrosting elements disappeared than yeah, bubbles of rust appearing here. So that's well worth checking as well. Has it still got the original BMW glass in it? Because if it isn't, watch out for the rust bubbles all the way round where that window has been fitted, front and back. Right, if you're buying a model which purports to be an individual model, then make absolutely sure it is. Now, an individual is a car that has an exterior colour or an interior upholstery that didn't come from the standard E31 palette. And so this is an individual model, and it has both interior and exterior as individual items. So we've got more metallic paintwork, which is a fantastic colour, and that wasn't from the standard E31 palette. And to go with it, of course, we've got champagne nappa interior, and with its contrasting piping. So this is an individual model, and you can pop the bonnet open, and on the left hand strut tower will have a sticker to tell you that it's an individual. The buyer of this car, the initial buyer, went absolutely mad. He bought the CSI door cards, champagne nappa leather, Mora metallic, velours for the carpets. He went for seat heating, he went for cruise control, and he went for automatic steering wheel lift and reach controls. And they weren't standard in the UK. Now, the cruise control is standard in the US, but not in the UK on the 840 models. And other things which I don't have is EDC, electronic damping control, and the rear window blind, which I quite like. But I don't have them. But the rest of this is absolutely magnificent with the CSI door cards. Now, how much would this have cost the buyer? Well, nothing at all, because in 98 and 99, BMW in the UK decided that any buyer could have anything they like from the individual range, which included the seats and the door cars and any exterior colour you like as well. They really wanted to get rid of the E31. It wasn't selling at all well. So, yeah, the buyer of this car, the initial buyer just said, oh, well, have all of it then. Just stick everything on it. And I'm really glad they did. I love the leather in this with its contrasting piping. And of course, they got the sports stuff for absolutely nothing as well. It was free in 98 and 99. So you end up with a car so highly spec'd, as highly spec'd as a CSI on an 840. And these cars demand much higher prices because they're so unusual. You don't find many E31s with these colour combinations. In fact, this nappa leather with Mora metallic, there's 3 examples in the whole world. So yeah, these cars demand a much higher price. So if it's advertised as an individual, make sure it is by checking all those points. Something well worth checking is the air conditioning. You would have thought in a cold climate you don't need air conditioning, but in the UK you certainly do. And that's because we need to keep the interior of the car dry. So having working air conditioning is imperative. Also that the sword, which is the final stage unit for the blower, is working. It's a bit of a pain in the neck to get to and quite expensive to replace. So you need to check that the fan stops on off, starts running on the first fan position, that's the auto position, and then it slowly increases, and full blast really is full blast, and it really does push through a lot of air. The air conditioning on the E31 is fantastic, and that's where it's usually kept. Right, quickly before we go into the engine bay, let's talk about mileage of a car. I've always bought really high mileage cars, so as a general rule they've had better servicing. Where a car's just done a few miles, might get serviced once every 2 or 3 years and so on, and that's not good for a car. With high mileage examples, they generally get serviced every year, and that means it maintains the engine a lot better. This car's done 174,000 miles, which is pretty high, but as you can see it looks like new and it drives like new as well. So for investment purposes, I suppose you can buy a really low mileage example and the price will slowly increase, but probably not much over the rate of inflation. As a sort of investment, it's not a great car to buy. And of course, the longer you keep it somewhere, the more it deteriorates You keep it in a dry environment, then all the rubbery bits will dry out. If you keep it in a damp environment, it will go rusty. And so your investment slowly deteriorates and it's worth less money than you paid for it when you come to sell it. So I never look at cars as investments, and although I'd probably make quite a few quid on this if I sold it, I got it pretty cheaply because it had 97,000 miles on it when I bought it. So I'm not scared of high mileage cars. I much prefer them. As long as the interior's been looked after as well, then that's really usually a good bargain. So yeah, don't be scared of high mileage examples. I always buy high mileage examples. The E64's coming up to 120,000 miles, and that looks like new and drives like new as well. So don't be scared of high mileage. Right, let's have a look in the engine bay. Right, well, first of all, the E31's got a bit of a peculiar system for getting the bonnet open, so don't come looking like an amateur. These two paddles pop out, press them in, I'll lift the bonnet up. Right, what we're interested in on this car, this is the 840 Ci. It's a late one, so it's got the 4.4 version. Earlier one's got the M60 4 litre. And with the 4.4 versions, it's very important that the oil changes were done every year. Because if they weren't, then you start getting problems with the timing chain guides. One of the most important parts is the very small oil ways that run to the chain tensioner. So I've got a timing chain tensioner on this, hydraulic in its action. Not that it's got a spring in it, but a spring does very little. It's all done hydraulically. And if the oil wasn't changed regularly, then you start getting shellac build-up or varnish build-up on the engine. And those small oil ways then start getting clogged. That means that the chain wasn't kept in tension. That means it will flap about and it will disintegrate the timing chain guides. So how can we check that it was serviced every year? Obviously look at the service information for the early years, but then it usually gets into private hands and you can't be sure whether it's been serviced or not. Well, there are clues left behind underneath the oil cap. So what we'll do is we'll get a phone with the light on it, put it into video mode, take the cap off and have a look. So that's what we'll do. Cap off, have a look in there, and what we expect to see is lovely shiny surfaces. As you can see in there, the timing chain's always shiny, so don't let that put you off. But that bolt down there, the nut on that and the nut on the spray bar for the camshaft, they should be lovely and shiny, slightly sort of honey coloured. Now if they're looking black or dark brown, then just walk away. Don't spend any more time looking at the car. Hasn't been serviced properly, and you've got shellac build up, and that means problems for these engines. They've got quite a few small oil ways. And as I say, the timing chain tension is one of them, and that timing chain will probably start slapping around even if it isn't at the moment. So yeah, put the cap on, walk away, say thanks very much, but no thank you. There really isn't much you can do once the shellac's on everything. You can sort of take the valve covers off and scrub things, but it's a hiding to nothing. No, we're much more interested in finding a car that's been really well serviced. And the sign of being really well serviced is that a sort of honey coloured, very, very light brown look to all the nuts and bolts in there and the timing chain. And looking forward, you can also see the sprocket as well, so you can the front of the sprocket, so you can see if that should be a lovely aluminium sort of colour. If it's dark brown, then yeah, just walk away. So that's test number one, and that's the most important one for the engine, to make sure you're not going to have problems straight away there with the timing chain guides. It's also important for the rest of the engine. Next one, coolant. Now I bang on about coolant all the time, that it should have blue BMW coolant in there. There's no reason not to use BMW blue coolant. And if it hasn't got a blue coolant in it, then something else has been used. and it won't have the properties that the BMW coolant has. It isn't just an antifreeze, it's got so many other compounds in it. It's got lubricants in it, and you need the lubricants for the water pump and for a few other things like the heater valves. And it's a rubicizer and plasticizer, so it looks after plastic and rubber elements and silicon elements in the coolant chain. So we have to make sure it's got the blue coolant. And again, you use a phone, and first of all check it's got actually coolant in it, and the sort of the stick is bobbing around. Well, this one is, that's bobbling around quite nicely. It's a very hot day in the UK for a change, about 22, which is very hot for us. So the coolant's expanded and the float has started to float a bit higher than it normally does. Get your phone with the light on it, poke the stick down with the phone right where the lens is, and you should be able to check if the coolant is blue. If you can't see the coolant, then squeeze the top hose. That'll move the coolant around. If you squeeze it hard enough, it comes out of the hole at the top here, the bleed hole. And then you can check if it's blue. If it's not blue, it's sort of red or green stuff, again, walk away. We really don't want to be dealing with a car which has got problems with the coolant system. I mean, we can always change the radiator and the water valves where we can get hold of them. They cost an arm and a leg from BMW, and the cover breaks when you try and get it open. But the heater core for the cabin is very difficult to get to, and if you haven't used a coolant with an anti-corrosion agent, which of course BMW coolant does have in it, then you start get particles of rust going around the system. Every time I've seen a picture of someone taking heater valves out because they've gone wrong, it's full of corrosion. It really is, and that's because it's got the wrong coolant in. It's probably got plain water in it or something like that in a hot climate. You can't get away with it. You really do need BMW blue coolant in it to look after things like the heater valve. And of course the most important thing is the heater core, heater matrix in the cabin. Yep, if that goes wrong and starts leaking, it takes a while for you to notice where it's coming out, and to get to it, the whole dash has to come out. Yeah, getting BMW to do that, that's not going to happen. They don't know how to do it anymore. An independent might have a bit more luck. If you do it yourself, it's going to take a few days. Why buy a car with anything other than blue coolant? It just doesn't make sense. Sure, you can change the coolant and put BMW blue coolant in it, but by that point a lot of damage has occurred already, and you will have problems with the radiator and the hoses bursting and the heater valves are failing and the heater core blocking up. So yeah, they are quite tricky problems to fix. So yeah, these two things here, very important. Right, the wash wipe system is peculiar to the E32 and E31 with its separate intensive wash and standard wash. Some models have the headlight washing system, and in front of the headlights you'll have two little devices which pop up and squirt the headlights. They have a reservoir in the boot, but I mean, just cast a quick eye over it. When we get in the car, we'll have a look at the windscreen wipers. They're notorious on cars which haven't been used much for sort of wiping a sort of tiny little arc of the windscreen, and the washer's not working, and quite often you think, oh god, I've got to replace all the linkages. But no, that can be lubricated and sorted out, and it was the same on both of the cars that I bought. They both did a tiny little arc of wiping, and then I had to lubricate all the linkage, and they've been fine ever since. Yep, so we're going to check that the intensive wash works and the main wash works and so on. One of my big bugbears, and how you can tell, yeah, you tell them Pippi, if a car's been looked after, is has it got all its fittings? I've seen so many adverts for E31s, that's Pippi, that don't have all these fixings in, and that's just laziness. It's the same for that, same for these at the top of the engine, they should be fitted, and the same for the ones on the plastic engine covers as well. Has one there, one back there. Now you've got to think to yourself, if they're missing, why are they missing and why weren't they replaced? and that's generally just laziness. They've lost one of the fittings or broken it and thought, can't be bothered to fit it back on again, can't be bothered to buy one. Well, as soon as you hear someone saying I can't be bothered to on something like an E31, then it's not worth buying, because they can't be bothered to do a lot of things on it, and there could be all sorts of problems. So this is one of my big bugbears. These should all be fitted, so should the engine cover ones, and if they're not, then they cannot walk away, because it just shows the car hasn't been looked after. Right, let's see how this engine runs. That's the next thing to do. Well, we want to make absolutely sure there is no rattling from the timing chain, because that means a lot of money spent on the car, or days and days of you doing it yourself. So have someone round the back, have a camera or something on the front, have a listen to the noise. Well, the noise will keep going, so we don't have to worry about that. So if you've got a friend, send them round the back and let's check if there's any smoke coming out. Right, let's start the car up. Should start up absolutely immediately. Revs be a bit high, about 800 RPM, and it will stay like that for a little while. There shouldn't be any shaking of the car. Should be perfectly stable, have no sort of problems at all in the cabin. Shouldn't feel the car moving around. This one is absolutely stable. And after just a few seconds, the engine speed will reduce to around about 700 if you've got the air conditioning on, and about 550 if you haven't. All this time we shouldn't be getting any timing chain rattling. The viscous coupled fan will make quite a bit of racket because it's locked to start with if the engine hasn't been run for any length of time, so that'll be moving a lot of air, and after a little while you'll hear the engine quieten down as the viscous coupled fan unlocks. So at the moment we've got a raised tick over. Viscous fan's doing a lot of work, moving a lot of air, but we should have absolutely no feeling of movement in the car. The V8s are really smooth engines with a cross plane, so you shouldn't have any problems at all with the car shaking. If you've got the car shaking, then you've probably got a misfire or something, and although sometimes the misfires are quite easy to diagnose and repair, it's probably not worth the effort. You might have a burnt valve, for instance. Right, well, the engine's quietened down. I can hear the viscous coupled fan has stopped. The other camera will be watching that. And after a few seconds, then our idle speed is going to drop as well. And at this point, we can go out and have a quick check of those timing chain guides. Now, all through this, there shouldn't be any knocking noises, shouldn't be any smoke coming out of the engine, shouldn't be any rattling coming from the engine. Now, the V8 engines give out a few noises. They make a sort of drocky noise. That's perfectly normal. Of the many of them that I've had, they all make the funny drocky noise. Probably the lifter, so there's nothing to worry about. Shouldn't be any ticking, and the only ticking you should get is from the charcoal canister ventilation valve, which does confuse a few people because that will tick away quite rapidly and then all of a sudden it will stop again. So okay, our idle speed's coming down. Let's have a look around the engine. Right, first of all, let's check for smoke. Nothing at all. Yeah, that's exactly as we should see it. No smoke whatsoever. In colder weathers you'll get a bit of steam, and as I showed on a previous video, there's a way to check between steam and smoke. You put your camera right in front, it will steam it up, and then you move the camera away and the steam will immediately evaporate and the picture will become clear again. So let's do that again. You can see it starting to steam the lens up. Move it away. There we go, steam clears. If that was oil, it wouldn't clear. So have a good look around the car. Listen for any strange noises coming from it. So yeah, this is what we expect. Fan has slowed down, so there's no whooshing noise. Idle speed reduced to 700. Engine's not rocking at all, it's absolutely dead stable. You can put a hand on it, you can put the coin on it if you like and it will stay there. So really nice and quiet, no knocking noises at all, so you can't even hear the tappets on this one. That's what you'd expect on an engine which has been serviced so regularly. Yeah, that's all sounding lovely. So this is where you'd hear timing chain noises, this bank here, and you'd hear rattling, and it's quite noticeable. So you can use this video as a reference point to what you're going to hear from an engine. This engine's perfectly happy. So yep, everything is looking fine in here now. Have a quick look around. Oil leaks, I'm afraid the V8s do get oil leaks, rocker covers and things like that, inevitable, but don't expect to see big puddles of oil on the ground, that wouldn't be good at all. This engine's got a couple of oil leaks, but it's not a deal breaker. I'd much rather have a tiny little oil leak than to start changing the rocker cover gaskets, because that involves taking quite a bit apart, and with always the possibility of not getting it quite right on the way back together again. So yeah, tiny little oil weeks from the engine, that's fine. So okay, if this was in a garage forecourt, I'd be perfectly happy with that. Sounding lovely. Right, well, let's go for a test drive. And we'll discuss things we're expecting to see in here. Get all the windows up to start with. Yeah, make sure the windows work. There we go, all windows up. Right, with an automatic, we expect no thumps as it goes into gear. Slight drop in engine revs. We're now about 500, 550. And off we go. So there's certain things we need to check for sure. And one of those, of course, is SHIMMY. But before we get going, let's check those windscreen wipers. We'll check the intensive wash and the main wash by just one button press, and we expect the wipers to work properly. There we go, intensive wash, standard wash, few wipes. Yeah, we're wiping the whole area of the windscreen. One more, and park. So the windscreen wipers drop themselves down below the level of the bonnet. Okay, gear changes on the 5 HP gearboxes are usually not really noticeable at all, and so we've now dropped into second gear without any thumps or bumps. Should be smooth, absolutely no problems at all. Exactly the same drivetrain was used in the flagship 740i E38. So we expect the drivetrain to be pretty much refined. Okay. That third gear, fourth gear, no rumbles or rattles or anything like that. Yeah, we expect the drive of an E31 to be quite refined. Now this car's got a couple of modifications. It's got a 3.15 differential and sports exhaust on it, so it'll sound a bit different and it will go slightly faster. But apart from that, no, it's exactly the same. So expect the exact same sort of performance from the car that you drive. Okay, so we're just coming out of a 30 limit, and this is when we check for SHIMMY. SHIMMY can be fixed quite easily, but it also is nigh on impossible to fix in other situations. So here we go, 55 miles per hour. So somewhere between 55, well, about 50 and 60 miles an hour, that's when you get SHIMMY, and absolutely nothing at all. That's what you expect. Now, if you start feeling shaking through the steering wheel, then yeah, I'm afraid that could be difficult to fix. So I'd have second thoughts about buying a car with SHIMMY, just because it can be a real job to fix it. I'll put a link up about SHIMMY just in case you're interested. But I'm very glad to say that this feels absolutely lovely, smooth. The driving is very direct, which it should be, even on an ancient car like the E31. I mean, it was a Grand Tourer, and the steering should be precise, and that's exactly what it is. Very slight movements of the steering wheel are noticed straight away in the driving wheels. So yeah, that's what we expect. Expect it to be nicely planted on the road and nicely controllable, no wander or anything like that, no tram lining. Right, temperature has reached the middle, so the temperature gauge is pointing right up at 12 o'clock, and that's where it should stay. It should reach that point reasonably quickly and then stay at that position. It should never go slightly above the 12 o'clock position, because that means that the cooling system just isn't working properly. So we'll keep an eye on that while we're driving. So yeah, we're at 12 o'clock, the air conditioning's working nicely, keeping cool in the cabin. As I say, very important to have working air conditioning, especially in the winter when you get in the car with your damp shoes. It'll make the carpet damp, and eventually, without air conditioning, it'll get to a point where it'll start to smell and you'll get condensation on the windows. So yeah, very important, make sure the air conditioning works. If they just say, oh, air conditioning needs a regas, well then take about £1,000 off the price, because that's what it could cost you to fix it. Right, I'm using Steptronic control now. It's a Steptronic box in these cars, well, in the 4.4 version. The 4-litre version it isn't, and the Steptronic works back to front as you'd expect it on a modern car. So to change, we're in 3rd gear, M3, changing 4th, you have to push it forwards. Righty ho, well, we're at the centre of the gauge, so we can give it a bit more beans. Let's see what sort of performance we get. Wow, that's it, just keeps on pushing and pushing and pushing. That is fantastic. A lovely acceleration. That's what you should expect from an E31, and you've got to give it a lot of welly now and again, so you might as well do it during your test drive. Don't spare the horses, that's what I say. Give it some welly, make sure nothing blows up or falls off. I'd much rather it blow up or fall off during a test drive than when I've got it home. So yeah, give it some welly. Steptronic again, make sure that's working fine. Don't use 1st gear, absolutely no need to use 1st gear on these cars, they've got so much torque. Right, let's spin around. Right, let's do that again from 2nd gear. Make sure the gears change without thumping. We're under full power. Wait until we've got a bit of road where I can see where I'm going. About 3,000 RPM is when the M62 power band starts. About 4,000 for the M60, I'm afraid. So here we go, up at 3,000 RPM, 35 miles an hour. Wow, that's a lot of power. Yeah, and very quickly up to illegal speed, so let's slow that back down again. Brakes shouldn't pull to the left or right, so should be dead straight, powerful. They're not so sensitive on an E31. For instance, my E64 just need to touch the brakes and they're doing a lot of work. On the E31, they're a bit more, well, vague about it, but it's got some excellent stopping power all the same. So yeah, make absolutely sure that the brakes actually do work properly. Give it a quick jab. That's it, lovely. Yeah, so brakes are working fine, but don't expect them to be so sensitive. Keep an eye on the temperature gauge. We're in drive this time, so we're going to use the automatic properties of the gearbox. We go through 3 gears up to 4. The performance in drive is pretty lackluster, even for a 4.4 litre engine. It's pretty feeble. If you want any power, any performance, then put the gearbox into sport or use the Steptronic mode. It'll drop down gears a lot earlier, but you'd be surprised how long the pedal is to actually get it to do something. So poke it down a little bit. That was probably about 3 inches of travel, and you don't get much. You really have to push it close to the floor, and when you do, it'll drop down a gear and off you go. And it's a fantastic feeling in sports mode or Steptronic, but don't expect great performance in drive. You're not going to get it. Anyway, that's probably far enough for a test drive. We've checked the brakes, we've checked the steering, both which can be quite expensive to sort out. We checked the power of the engine, the performance of the gearbox, keeping an eye on the old air conditioning, make sure it's keeping us cool and it's working. Yeah, and if this was a car on a forecourt, I'd be chewing his hand off, I really would, because this does seem to be a good example of an E31. Everything working fine. In fact, the only things that are not working properly is my indicators. They seem to be going about twice the speed as they should have, even though I've got all my lights are working. That's LEDs for you, I'm afraid. I need to sort that out. So we'll do just a little bit more driving. We'll go up to motorway speed, I think. That'd be a good idea. Take it up to 80 miles an hour, make sure everything's fine there. Off we go. What's the A3 looking like today? Locked up? No, we're okay. We'll be able to get home all right. Steptronic mode into second. Reasonably clear. Let's go. There we go. So we checked the gear changes, they were great. Checked the performance, fantastic, up at just around about 80 miles an hour. In cruising, no vibrations, nothing horrible happening. The temperature gauge is exactly at 12 o'clock as we expect. If there's a lack of cooling performance, then giving it quite a lot of power, we'd expect the temperature to creep up, but we're not getting any of that at all. Right, we've got a turn off coming up. Never mind, we'll slow down on the entrance using Steptronic to slow the car down. Performance on the corners, let's give it some welly. That's it, that's the way to do it. Yeah, it feels lovely, absolutely perfect around that corner. Flat as a pancake, lovely. So yeah, suspension performance fantastic. Only thing letting us down is the indicators. You can't win them all. So yeah, pleased with the steering performance. It's cornered nice and flat. Beautiful it was. Car in the slow lane, let's go. There we go, up to 80 miles an hour in third gear. Perfect, perfect for cruising. Cruise on. There we go, just cruising along. No rattles, air conditioning nice and cool. Perfect, that's what we expect from an E31. So while we're in here, the air conditioning was checked, we're still nice and cool, the air conditioning's working fine. Check the windscreen wipers. The fact that this car's used quite often is reflected in the fact that the windscreen washers and wipers work as they should do. Cars which haven't been used often, they end up with just a sort of short arc of windscreen being cleaned. That can be sorted with lubrication. Don't let a garage tell you you've got to change all the wiper linkages. You don't have to. There we go, back again. Yeah, that was nice, that wasn't it? It was very enjoyable in the E31. I haven't driven it for a while because it's been so sunny, but there we go, test drive over. Next things we've got to check is sort of the lights pop up and work. Check for damp, that's very important. With a sunroof has drains, they do block up, especially where the sunroof is used and then open and closed a few times. You can get leaves and stuff building up, and then the sunroof drains stop working, and then instead of the water going down the sunroof drains, they go down the A pillar up here and end up in the glove compartment and then onto the floor. So it's a very important thing to check that the carpets are very dry underneath the glove compartment, and all the sort of bits and bobs work, like the interior lights and so on, because when water goes down the A pillar it ends up on a bank of 3 modules, which is on exactly the same side on left and right hand drive cars, which is on the left hand side of the car. Get water going into them and eventually they'll catch fire. I've seen ones with big holes burnt in them, and then the air conditioning, the central locking doesn't work, the windows don't work, interior lights don't work, and a few other things. So check for dampness, very important. Right, there we go then. Rear fog light failure. We'll have to do that hinge, I'm afraid, but there we go. Okay, we're back again. So yes, I enjoyed that test drive. That went very well. I'd be very happy to buy this car so far. Rightio, well, I think we're just about done. What I do is I'll put up a list here. I must sort out the boot hinge wiring. I'll show you that while we're here. Rightio. The toolbox has moved around during sharp cornering. Yeah, these the wires here, the looms here, it's this one here that's causing the problem. I can see where it's bent too sharply. Yeah, so these looms here, as they go in, they do fatigue, and the wiring is sort of not great. The condition of the wires, actually, they start disintegrating. It's the biodegradable time of the manufacture. So these do fail. Not too hard to do. I've got a video on how to do it, and it's just something I'm going to have to sort out. So yeah, everything else fine. Everything is just like a normal car, so we don't really bother to look at it. Just make sure, if you're really interested in having excellent bodywork, obviously go around the whole car. They do suffer from rust in England, and the first place you get rust is on the sunroof. Let's take you around there. There we go. Yeah, rust on the sunroof. And the new lids, you can get the metal parts from BMW, but then you've got to do the palaver of getting them painted and so on. They won't sell them to you painted, they're no longer available, and you have to fit the seals as well. So yeah, it's very difficult to do a successful repair of these rust spots. They come back almost immediately because of the double skin of these. What's actually happening is the inner skin has gone rusty, and no matter what you do to the outer skin, it just bubbles straight back up again. And yeah, if you're interested in the condition of the paintwork, obviously spend quite a lot of time going round the car and checking the paintwork. Right, that's just about it. We've gone through quite a few aspects of the E31, but importantly, we've gone through the ones which are going to be expensive to repair if they are faulty. Now, the E31 is never going to be a perfect car. 22 years at the youngest. There's always things going to go wrong with these cars. They're not 100% reliable no matter what you do to them. And even the nut and bolt restoration ones, which you can buy for 50 grand, well, they're still got rubber and plastic and electronics which are as old as the rest of the car, can't be replaced because they're no longer available. As an investment, an E31 probably isn't a great idea. I bought this for £6,000 10 or 11 years ago. It's probably worth about 4 times that much, but only because it's been looked after and used every day and kept in really good condition. Now, I'd much rather pay less money for a car and then spend a bit of time doing it up and getting it to look 100%. Right, well, thanks very much for the comments on my videos. I really do enjoy looking at them and replying to them as soon as possible. And if you've got any other aspect of the E31 you want me to go through, then put it down in the comments. Put a like on the video if you want to, and thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you next time.